Hi, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to Molly's Salon. This is our weekly program every Thursday evening where I interview innovative thinkers and creative firebrands. And we're living through a critical time in American history with the COVID-19 pandemic and a vital social justice movement led by Black Lives Matter. Our guests are a variety of artists and leaders discussing new ideas, how they're coping with the coronavirus and making positive social change, as well as showing us glimmers of hope for the future. My guests this week are Tom Kitt, who's a composer, a musical theater artist for projects like Next to Normal, If Then, Dave, Jagged, Little Pill. Tara Susman-Peña, who is a senior technical expert in IREX's Center for Applied Learning and Impact, and Suzanne Firstenberg, who is a visual artist in a project called In America, How Could This Happen? That is happening right now here in Washington, D.C. Tom Kitt is an American composer, conductor, orchestrator, and musician. For the score for the musical Next to Normal, he shared the 2010 Pulitzer Prize for Drama with Brian Yorkey. He's also won 2 Tony Awards, an Outer Circle Critics Circle Award for Next to Normal, as well as a Tony and Outer Critics Circle nominations for If Then and SpongeBob SquarePants. He's been nominated for 8 Drama Desk Awards, winning for Jagged Little Pill. It's so great to see you, Tom. I always love to see you.
Great to see you too, Molly. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm really pleased that you're here. And I'm going to take you back. I want to take you back first to Next to Normal.
Yes.
I know some of our audiences will remember that a piece of that journey, or they will remember seeing it over in Crystal City when we were nomadic. Next to Normal had a kind of unusual life. It premiered in New York, and then it came to Arena, and then it went back and went to Broadway. And how was that journey from your perspective?
I always describe it as a journey that you never thought you would take, that it was very unorthodox, and you couldn't plan that kind of trajectory for a show, but everything that needed to happen happened in the right way. And after second stage, I had left that when we closed at second stage, I thought, well, maybe that's the end of work on the show, and we'll license it. And when I found out that there was an opportunity to come to Arena and continue to develop the piece, Brian and I talked about it. Michael Greif had a great quote, which is, "More life is better than not." And thankfully we listened to him, because we did an enormous amount of work. And for people that had seen it second stage, there were a lot of the building blocks that were still a part of the show, but 9 songs were either rewritten or tweaked in some way. And it was just, there was suddenly a great clarity, which had began actually at second stage, because we had cut a number and reworked the opening number in our last week of shows there. So we never stopped working, and it thankfully it went the way that it did.
Well, it was an amazing show, deep and dangerous, and just beautifully done by all of you. So it was a pleasure. It's a real turning point for us at Arena as well.
Thank you, Molly.
It was, it was just an incredible moment. It was like it was a lightning flash.
Well, we were very, very lucky with Next to Normal, having second stage, as I mentioned, you and Arena Stage, David Stone, who from the beginning had such a personal connection to the show, and did everything that he could to keep us going, and to motivate, and to make us believe that we had something. And in terms of just watching from the sideline, in terms of producing and all that he did, and because that was a challenging time, both Arena and Broadway, because it was in the middle of the financial crisis, 2008,
Yep.
2009. And there were a lot of people who probably said to David, "You're really moving this musical to Broadway at this time." And he believed in it, and he came up with a way to make it work. Of course, you need to deliver the show and have a connection with an audience to make them want to come see it. But everyone just who came into the Next to Normal orbit felt a deep connection to these characters in this story, and felt, as we were, privileged to tell it and to bring it to an audience. And that continues to this day as Next to Normal's life continues, even in this pandemic. I hear from people, we explore the material on our own, and now I see my kids learning about it and coming to it. So it's wonderful that the story of Next to Normal continues even at this moment.
I love it. I love it. You know, Tom, you're an unusual theater artist because when we look at the kind of range of work that you've done, you know, something like Dave, which also premiered at Arena Stage, which was based on the film, and that was 2 years ago, or SpongeBob SquarePants, or Jagged Little Pill, or If Then. I'm just really curious about what it is in you as an artist that is drawn to a wildly divergent set of different subjects.
Well, at the center of all those musicals are human stories that I want to tell. I want to be part of art that serves to enlighten, to entertain, of course, but to teach us about ourselves, to teach us how we want to evolve, how we want to become better people, certainly for ourselves, but to all those that we love. And I love a good cry. I love characters that make me feel and emote. And all those musicals that you name have moments where I'm just connected in a way that feels physical, that I can feel the waves of emotion through my body. And when I think of those stories and what I want people to get out of them, and then I think that I have the power to tell them, I feel just a great honor and privilege to be an artist and to get to tell those stories. And that's really the thing that I'm always searching for, is what is the story that needs to be told in this moment? What are the things that I want to learn from in telling that story? And then learn from as I see people respond to it and engage with it.
I love that. I love that. Are you finding that you are approaching writing differently now during the pandemic in terms of composing?
Well, I think that certainly the pandemic and the routine that I had before, which was really sort of thriving on being busy and in a number of different projects, that I just loved the kind of constant bubbling that my mind was doing, going from this rehearsal room to this rehearsal room to this meeting, and then sitting for hours and writing, and then suddenly everything stopped. And not only did it stop and you just had to figure out what you were going to do, but it's also, it takes an emotional toll, because there's a lot of loss in that. And it's not just me, it's my family, it's my kids who are also artists and want to be on the stage. So I had to go through a period where I had to just figure out how I was going to find the new routine and really find a safe space, because creating art is about positive motion and energy, sitting somewhere and saying, oh, I have this idea that I have to work through. And there was a lot of, I'm just not feeling inspired right now, because I don't know what I'm hopeful about. I don't know what, there's so much uncertainty. There's so much that you feel scared every day. And so that was hard to find and then you find, okay, but I have to speak to this moment. So how am I going to now pick myself up and create art that is urgent for where I am right now? And I really have to thank my wife and my kids for motivating me and challenging me to do that. And I also have to thank my fellow artists. You know, what's been so inspiring is how are the awakenings that have happened, the you know, all of the important conversations, the continuing fight for social equity that you know, has just been so galvanizing. And I know for me, I want to be part of that movement. I want to be along with my fellow artists, you know, having these important conversations and bringing awareness and fighting for important things. And that comes also with the art that you're making. And so for me, I think it's also what was the reality pre-pandemic is sort of even just to write a story where people are in close contact with one another and having dinner with one another, and holding one another, it's not where we are. So some of that has also been, can I kind of go into that alternate reality and write those stories that will go back to, or do I need to also consider where we are and use that to inform the stories I want to tell?
I love it, Tom. We're at time already. But I want to thank you, and also thank you for bringing your activism into your work as an artist. And I love seeing you and can't wait to see you again soon in the theater.
Me too, Molly. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye. Next up is Tara Susman-Peña. She's a senior technical expert in IREX's Center for Applied Learning and Impact and in the information and media practice. And Tara provides technical expertise on media literacy, media development, and research across the IREX portfolio. There she is. And her work also focuses on adapting and expanding IREX's media and information literacy methodology, Learn to Discern, for the United States and other countries. She specializes in the role of media, information, and innovation in governance, development, and resilience. Welcome.
Thanks. Good to be
It's so
here.
great to see you, because I feel like there might be a little globe right over your right shoulder. Is it?
It is. It's not a globe. It's an octopus vase, actually, that I got in Central America a few years ago, back when we used to travel.
We will again. We will again.
Looking forward to it. Yeah.
But it's beautiful thinking about your work from a global perspective. And, you know, media literacy is such an important topic these days. And some people who are listening right now, who may be theater people, may not be familiar with IREX and your work. So tell us a little bit more.
Sure. So IREX is a global development organization. We're based in DC, and we've been around for over 50 years. And when I say global development, I don't mean actually the sort of bridge building or road building or kind of health, although those things are critically important. We really work on kind of the human side of human development. So really helping make sure that people have the skills, ability, organization to kind of drive their own development. As communities, as civil society, we support journalism and journalists as well, and education and leaders. So across a number of different things. And in terms of the media literacy work, I think you asked about, that is something that's been really booming and exploding over the last 5 or so years since we've been working on this. Our work in this area started in Ukraine. We've been working in Ukraine, I think, for a couple of decades now, doing a number of different types of education and civil society building programs. And we developed this methodology specifically around giving people the skills to sort of identify and resist manipulation by Kremlin-driven disinformation. And we are very evidence-driven, so we did a lot of research on the work. We found that it was quite effective in giving people skills and improving their abilities. And so we've been expanding it. And in the years since then, we're in, I believe, about 15 different countries and also some global exchange programs doing this kind of work, as well as some smaller programs in the US. And so for us, media literacy is actually kind of a broad umbrella, but for IREX, it really is specifically giving people skills to manage disinformation. And I'm thinking of it sort of more and more in some ways, almost as like informational well-being, because it's not just about sort of, you know, spotting fake news or kind of debunking, you know, whatever it is, lies. That's a part of it, clearly. Critical thinking is also really important, but it's also about kind of managing the huge volumes of information that flow at you and managing your own emotional reactions to these kinds of things, becoming better at reflecting on our own consumption and sharing and exchange. So it's kind of that whole world of things.
I love this. I love this. I would love to take a class with you. I think we all need to take a class with you. I'm curious if you can give us just a taste of one of the areas that you work in, how you teach people to look at a potential lie and see it clearly, or turn it on its head, or how you teach people to remove themselves for periods of time from
Yeah.
social media or from the news. Just one idea of what you teach.
Sure. So maybe I'll talk about something that's one of the more atypical kind of media literacy approaches, because I think there's a lot of great organizations that teach media literacy out there that can teach you how to verify and check and cross-check. But I think our emphasis on kind of the emotional manipulation piece of things and on sort of regulating your own emotions is maybe a little bit of a difference. So one of the very simple things that we emphasize is any time you come across something, let's say social media, you might come across something that makes your hair stand on end, makes you very upset, makes your pulse start to go faster, makes you sweat. I think actually we probably all have had this experience numerous times. We teach this very simple psychological technique that we did not make up, but was Dr. Dan Siegel, a researcher in psychology, and it's called Name It to Tame It. So the idea is that anytime you come across a piece of information that suddenly, like, your IQ drops, you can't think straight because you're so furious or so excited or you're so curious, right? Then you stop for a moment. If it's with a screen, I would encourage people to actually physically look away from the screen. And then you just ask yourself, what was my reaction, right? What am I feeling? And you put a name to that feeling. So it's name it to tame it. So the idea is, by bringing language back to what's going on, you're taking back the executive part of your brain, right? And once you've kind of given yourself control again of your critical thinking, then you can look at kind of verification techniques. You can look at the source. You can actually decide what to do with it, as opposed to just reacting. And I know we've all been in this situation where we've just like angrily written a comment or angrily shared or happily liked something, and then later thought, should I have done that, right? So this is just a very simple psychological technique that can help sort of regulate your emotions first.
I love that. Yeah, it's almost like our alligator brain
Absolutely.
gets triggered, and finding a way to bring it to another side of our thinking. Are there things that you found yourself doing during the pandemic you never thought you'd do?
Wow. Well, I've been cooking.
There you have it.
I mean, I guess I have cooked in the past, but it's not one of my favorite things to do. But I was just this week, I was like, oh, the New York Times cooking app. I'm going to actually create some recipes, not create, but follow some recipes and make them. So I guess, and I think it's similar to a lot of people's stories. Like, I've felt like the creative side of things is very, very important. I'm married to an artist. I have children that are all very creative. And sometimes I feel like I get very, wrapped up in the sort of more sort of intellectual or other type of implementation work that I do. So like I'm spending a lot more time on creative pursuits, like, I don't know, cooking, or trying to do some beading, or like something like the painting of this room, which
Beautiful.
I can't take credit for, but I am enjoying it.
Beautiful. Well, it has been a time of high creativity for people, I think, and that's pretty wonderful. That may be one of the glimmers of hope that we carry with us. We only have one more minute left,
Sure.
but I'd love to know what you're reading and if you read
Hmm.
fiction or nonfiction.
Yes. Well, I sort of go back and forth between fiction or nonfiction. I've been having a hard time reading, honestly, because I just, like, my mind is a bit crazy. I just finished a really beautiful little book called Department of Speculation, Jenny Ophil, from a couple of years ago. It's almost
Yeah,
like kind of poetry or something. It's a very different kind of perspective or way into thinking about life and being able to really tell a rich story in very few words. So I love that. And if you have a recommendation about what to read next, I'm looking for something. But I think fiction is what I personally need to be reading now.
great, great. Well, Well, it's so great to see you, and thank you so much for coming on the show, and thank you for all the incredible work that you're doing around this kind of media literacy. It's so important.
Well, thanks so much for having me. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Suzanne Firstenberg comes from South Dakota, and art was not her first focus. Although sculpting was her heritage, her father, E.A. Sullivan, sculpted and rode the range with the artist Charles Russell. After earning her MBA, she worked in the pharmaceutical industry and finally arrived in Washington, D.C. to a job in the United States Senate. For balance, she volunteered with the terminally ill. She discovered she was an artist during an adult ceramics class and then immediately began learning materials and methods: painting, drawing, welding, neon tube bending, stone carving, taking classes wherever she could. Hi, Suzanne.
Hi, Molly. Thank you so much for having me this evening.
Oh, thrilled to have you. Thrilled to have you. You know, I read about your work, and I read about your work in the Washington Post. And my partner, Suzanne, and I came to see you and your work at RFK, outside of RFK here in Washington, D.C. I was so deeply moved by your installation, In America, How Could This Happen?, which is still open through November 30th. And like many families, our family lost loved ones to the virus. And I love this part of your artistic statement. Unlike other artists, you won't visually recognize my style. You will feel it viscerally. Talk to us about how you found inspiration for this piece and describe what it is for our audience.
All right. First of all, the piece is, well, it encompasses 3.5 acres of land. What I'm doing is planting a white flag for every person who dies from this pandemic. That was important to me. Tara was referring to a program called Name It to Tame It, and I had to name it early on in the pandemic. I named my emotion outrage. And so I knew that as a visual artist, I had to do something with it. I was outraged by 2 things. I was outraged, first of all, because we were basically devaluing lives. If you remember early on, the Lieutenant Governor of Texas had suggested that the elderly might be willing to give up their lives, you know, risk themselves just so that we could open up the economy. That felt pretty uncomfortable to me, especially after 25 years of hospice volunteering. And then as well, just about the time that we were learning that communities of color are disproportionately affected by this virus because they're frontline workers, because of pre-existing conditions and such, that was just about the time that people were clamoring to open up everything. And that didn't sit right with me. We have been really devaluing lives for a long time, but this pandemic has really brought that to the forefront. And so those situations made me realize I needed to do something in this pandemic to make a statement about the value that each life matters. As well, though, when the numbers got so big on that American death toll, I think it was in mid-August when there was a Washington Post headline that said 170,000 death count is just a statistic. I thought, oh my God, as a visual artist, I have to do something, because when words no longer matter and when numbers get too big, the visual arts have to step in. I will say the performing arts too, but visual artists in particular needed to step up for this one. And so I did. That's when I began searching for a piece of ground that would be large enough to encompass this mass toll. And I found it right outside RFK Stadium. But yes, I say that really I was driven by outrage, frankly.
Well, absolutely. And the piece is so moving. It's a time of mourning. It's a poem. It is all of these 750,000 now flags that are fluttering, that are reminding us of life. Did I just say something?
Yeah, today, actually, it's quite prescient of you to have me on tonight, because today we passed the 250,000 mark. 250,000 American lives have been lost to this pandemic, which really makes it the largest mass casualty event most of us will ever experience in our lifetimes. We just aren't considering it like that because it's a drip, drip, drip. of deaths day after day for months on end. But this is an American tragedy. And I wanted to use art to really say that.
Well, you did.
Thank you.
You
Thank you
did.
for coming, because it's
Oh.
people who visit the art that bring the meaning to it. I, as a visual artist, can create the space, and I created this space for really national mourning, and people bring their grief. It's people who come and personalize a flag for a family member and then include it in the installation. That really brings meaning to it for those who haven't had a loved one who has died in this pandemic. But when visitors come and they see names, they expect to see white flags, but they see names on some of them periodically here and there. It just brings home the fact that each life, or excuse me, each white flag encompasses so much grief. And then you raise your glance or your gaze and see 250,000 of them. It's really hard to wrap one's head around.
It is. It is. And yet you've given a name to it through your visualization of it. You've given a name to it. And I want to take you back to something that you said earlier, which is at a certain moment when you saw that number of 160,000, you thought, oh, this is where a visual artist needs to step in. Have there been other moments like that in your life where you as a visual artist felt that you needed to step in because of something that was happening in the world?
Oh, actually, the last 2.5 years of my life have been devoted to that. I have created something called the Empty Fix Project. It's an art series of 7 different installations having to do with drug addiction and trying to reduce the stigma surrounding it. I didn't know a thing about drug addiction when I started this project. And so I went around the country. I visited 22 or 23 different states. And I interviewed hundreds of people who are suffering or recovering from drug addiction. And they helped me understand, for instance, what's at the core. And they pointed the way towards trying to come up with good ideas about prevention. And so that's what I've done. I've used my art. And someday when the pandemic is over, I can actually premiere most of that art. So I look forward to providing that as well. One other thing, though, I just have to tell you, the beginning of the pandemic was just so fraught. We just didn't know what was happening. We didn't understand the pathology of this disease. And I had to find a way to speak to my anxiety about what was happening and about how our nation was being led through these early months. And so I recreated Edvard Munch's The Scream, but instead of using brushstrokes, I'll admit it, I used Donald Trump quotations. So
Wow.
that helped me through summer. And then I began preparing for In America. So I've been creatively quite busy during this pandemic. And I think that has helped me a lot in dealing with just the angst of it all.
I agree. It's been the same for me at Arena Stage. Every time I'm able to dive into a creative project, I'm able to lose myself.
Mhm.
Everything becomes synthesized in that piece of art, and I'm back in life. And when I don't have that, I can feel a little piece of myself receding. So, Suzanne, with everything that you're doing right now, where are you finding glimmers of hope for the future?
You know, I have to tell you, I'll just be frank, the biggest hope for me right now is that that we have the grown-ups. The grown-ups are going to be back behind the steering wheel, and that gives me a lot of hope. But also, that aside, politics aside, I really hope that this gives us a wake-up call. And as a visual artist, I'm really happy to have done In America, or to be continuing it, if you will, until the end of November, because it gives us pause. It gives us a moment to say, wait a minute, what's going on? And for me, what the message I want to get across is that it's time to rethink what patriotism in this country means. Having talked with so many of the foreign press who've come to cover the In America installation, it really is important that we all sit back and think, wow, is it all about our individual rights and wrapping ourselves in iconography like the American flag? Or is it about working for the common good and caring about one another? And I think that this pandemic gives us a pivot point that if we're smart, we'll use it.
Well, I have a feeling that many, many people are being drawn to exactly the idea of the common good, not the whole country, only parts of the country. But if it's possible to get to critical mass, then things continue to change. And I'm looking forward to that. And I'm also looking forward to the fact that we now have 2 vaccines that are coming in because we, in the theater, we can't get back into the theaters until there is really movement toward that kind of deep health. But Suzanne, thank you so much for coming on. I'm going to be showing a little video at the end of the program that gives people a taste of what your brilliant installation is all about.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Good to talk with you.
Great to talk to you. Thank you, Suzanne. I also want to mention Day of Reflection, which is an official remembrance event spearheaded by DC Arts Organizations, which will be held on Monday, November 23rd, in honor of friends, family, and loved ones lost to COVID-19. DC's vibrant and diverse creative community will unite for a day of special tributes and performances from DC luminaries in music, dance, theater, poetry, literary arts, visual arts, and the media. The 2-hour program will be broadcast live on Facebook at 7:00 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and will include a reading of the names of loved ones lost to COVID. I think that this is the perfect idea, and I think it's going to be a wonderful 2 hours. Really important for people to tune in, and you will see now what Suzanne's deeply effective and affecting piece in America. How could this happen? Is, and you'll see it a little bit from the beginning. Thanks, and we won't see you next week because we won't have a salon next Thursday. We'll be returning in 2 weeks, and my guests on December 3rd will be Erin Posner, playwright and director, Heather Raffo, playwright and actress from 9 Parts of Desire and Flash Acts, and Jimena Varela, associate professor and program director, arts management, American University. Until then, I leave you with Suzanne's beautiful piece.